She'll crash on her first solo flight. Sergeant Williams laughed as Lieutenant Maya Chen climbed into the F-16 cockpit. 6 hours later, when her engine exploded at 15,000 feet and she had 90 seconds to live, Williams would learn that the woman he mocked possessed flying skills that don't exist in any manual. What happened in those 90 seconds didn't just save her life. It proved that sometimes the steadiest hands in a crisis belong to the person everyone expects to panic. The morning sun cast long shadows across Edwards Air Force Base as Lieutenant Maya Chen performed her pre-flight inspection on the F-16 Fighting Falcon that would either make or break her military career. At 26, she was the first Asian American woman to qualify for the elite Thunderbirds demonstration team. But that achievement meant nothing to the male pilots who had spent 6 months trying to prove she didn't belong in the cockpit of America's premier fighter aircraft. The F-16 gleamed in the desert sunlight, its sleek profile representing 40 years of American aerospace engineering and the dreams of every pilot who had ever looked up at the sky. For Maya, it represented something more, the chance to prove that excellence in aviation had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with skill, preparation, and the courage to push beyond what others thought was possible. "Chen," called out Sergeant Tom Williams, the crew chief who had made his opinions about female pilots abundantly clear since Maya's arrival at Edwards. "You sure you can handle 50,000 pounds of aircraft moving at 600 miles per hour? This isn't a flight simulator anymore." Maya continued her inspection with methodical precision, checking control surfaces, examining the engine intake, and testing every system that would keep her alive when she left the ground. She had heard variations of Williams's comments every day for the past 3 months, but today was different. Today was her first solo flight in the F-16, and everyone on the base was waiting to see if she would prove their doubts correct. "Sergeant Williams," Maya replied calmly, not looking up from her checklist, "I've logged 847 flight hours in military aircraft, completed advanced combat training, and graduated second in my class from pilot training. The F-16 responds to competence, not to whatever assumptions you might have about who should be flying it." But Williams wasn't finished. "Chen, when you're pulling 9 Gs and your vision starts to tunnel, when your aircraft is screaming through the sky at the edge of its performance envelope, you need physical strength and mental toughness that most women just don't have. I've seen a lot of pilots wash out when things get serious." What Williams didn't know was that Maya had grown up in a family of aerospace engineers. Her father had designed flight control systems, her mother had worked on avionics, and she had been studying aircraft performance data since she was 12 years old. The physics of flight that intimidated most pilots was, to Maya, simply a language she had been speaking her entire life. Captain Rodriguez, the squadron leader, approached as Maya completed her walk-around inspection. His expression carried the skepticism that had become familiar to every woman trying to break barriers in military aviation. "Chen, this isn't training anymore. Once you're airborne, you're responsible for a $35 million aircraft in your own life. If you feel any doubt about your abilities, now is the time to step back." Maya looked Rodriguez directly in the eyes. "Sir, I don't feel doubt. I feel ready." But as she climbed into the cockpit and began her startup procedures, Maya could hear the conversations that weren't meant for her ears, but weren't exactly whispered either. $50 says she aborts the takeoff," muttered one mechanic. "I'll take that bet," replied another. "But I say she makes it airborne and then calls for immediate landing when she realizes what she's gotten herself into." The F-16's engine spooled up with a whine that grew to a roar, the sound of American engineering at its finest. Maya ran through her pre-flight checks with the precision of someone who understood that attention to detail was the difference between triumph and disaster. "Edwards Tower, Lightning 01, requesting taxi clearance for solo flight training. Lightning 01, you are cleared to taxi runway 04 left, wind 270 at 15, altimeter 29.92 inches. As Maya taxied toward the runway, she could see ground crews and pilots gathering to watch her take off. Some were hoping for her success, but many were waiting for confirmation of their beliefs about women in fighter aircraft. The takeoff was flawless. The F-16 leapt into the desert sky like it was born to fly, and Maya felt the familiar rush of acceleration that reminded her why she had wanted to be a pilot since childhood. But 30 minutes into her training flight, at 15,000 feet above the Mojave Desert, everything changed. The first indication of trouble was a slight vibration in the engine that Maya felt through the aircraft structure. Her training kicked in immediately, and she began monitoring engine parameters while maintaining her assigned altitude and heading. Engine temperature rising, she noted, watching the digital displays that told the story of her aircraft's vital signs. Within seconds, the vibration became violent shaking, and warning lights began illuminating throughout the cockpit. Maya's engine was destroying itself at 15,000 feet, 50 miles from the nearest runway. Edwards Tower, Lightning 01 declaring emergency, engine failure, attempting restart. But the restart procedure failed, and Maya found herself flying a $35 million glider with very limited options for survival. On the ground, Williams was monitoring the radio frequency when Maya's emergency call came through. His expression changed from casual interest to genuine concern as he realized the pilot he had been mocking was now facing every aviator's worst nightmare. "She's dead," he said quietly to the other crew chiefs. "Single-engine failure at altitude, no runway within gliding distance. Even an experienced pilot would have trouble with this." But Maya was already implementing emergency procedures that went beyond anything taught in flight school. Using her deep understanding of aircraft aerodynamics, she began configuring the F-16 for maximum glide efficiency while calculating wind patterns and terrain features that could extend her range. Edwards Tower, Lightning 01. Engine restart unsuccessful. I have approximately 90 seconds of glide time to find a landing site. The tower controller's voice carried the tension that everyone on the frequency was feeling. Lightning 01. Nearest suitable runway is Edwards Main. Distance 47 miles. That's beyond your glide envelope. Maya's response was calm and professional, despite flying a powerless aircraft through the sky. Edwards Tower. I'm not going for Edwards Main. I've identified a dry lake bed at bearing 180. Distance 23 miles. Terrain analysis indicates suitable landing surface. What Maya was attempting had never been successfully completed in F-16 history. A dead-stick landing on an unprepared surface required precision flying that pushed both aircraft and pilot to their absolute limits. Using techniques that combined textbook aerodynamics with innovative thinking, Maya began a controlled descent that would either save her life or end it. She lowered her landing gear early to increase drag and steepen her approach angle, a counterintuitive move that most pilots would never consider. Lightning 01, your approach angle is too steep. You're going to stall the aircraft. But Maya had calculated everything precisely. Edwards Tower, approach angle is intentional. I'm using ground effect to extend my flare and reduce touchdown speed. As the F-16 descended through 1,000 feet, Maya could see the dry lake bed that represented her only chance for survival. It was smaller than ideal, rougher than preferred, but it was her only option. At 500 feet, Maya began her flare, using the cushion of the air between her aircraft and the ground to slow her descent rate while maintaining just enough airspeed to keep the F-16 controllable. The touchdown was perfect. The F-16 hit the lake bed at exactly the right speed and angle, rolling across the desert surface in a cloud of dust before coming to a stop just 200 feet from the far end of the landing area. Maya shut down all systems, popped the canopy, and climbed out of the aircraft to assess the damage. The engine was completely destroyed, but the airframe was intact and she was uninjured. Her radio crackled with voices from Edwards Tower, rescue helicopters, and fellow pilots who had been monitoring her emergency. But the voice that came through clearest was Sergeant Williams. Lightning 01, this is ground control. Chen, how did you know to do that? Maya's response would become part of Air Force legend. Ground control, I didn't know. I calculated. When you understand how aircraft really fly, emergency situations become engineering problems with aerodynamic solutions. The rescue helicopter arrived within 20 minutes, but Maya had already completed her post-incident inspection and was ready to brief investigators on exactly what had happened and why her unconventional approach had worked. Captain Rodriguez was aboard the rescue helicopter, and his first words to Maya set the tone for everything that would follow. Chen, what you just did was either the luckiest flying I've ever seen or the most skilled. Which was it? Maya considered her answer carefully. Sir, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I've been preparing for emergency situations my entire flying career. Today, I had the opportunity to prove that preparation worked. Back at Edwards, the investigation into Maya's emergency landing revealed that her engine failure had been caused by a manufacturing defect that could have affected any pilot. But her response to the emergency became a case study in how superior knowledge and calm decision-making could turn potential disaster into triumph. Sergeant Williams approached Maya as she completed her debriefing. His attitude was completely different from the morning's casual dismissal. Ma'am, I owe you an apology. What you did today, I've been working on aircraft for 15 years and I've never seen anything like it. You didn't just save your own life. You probably saved the Air Force millions of dollars in aircraft loss. Maya's response was characteristic of her approach to everything she had faced since arriving at Edwards. "Sergeant Williams, you don't owe me an apology for questioning my abilities. You owe it to yourself to question your assumptions about who can demonstrate those abilities." The pilots who had been making bets about Maya's performance were quiet during the evening briefing. Captain Rodriguez addressed the squadron with words that would be repeated throughout Air Force pilot training for years to come. What Lieutenant Chen demonstrated today wasn't just exceptional flying. It was exceptional thinking under pressure. She proved that when lives and equipment are on the line, the only thing that matters is competence and the courage to use it. 3 months later, Maya Chen was officially accepted into the Thunderbirds demonstration team, becoming the first woman to fly the precision maneuvers that showcase American aviation excellence to the world. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Sergeant Williams, who had initially doubted her abilities, requested to be assigned as her dedicated crew chief. "Ma'am," he said, "I want to work with the pilot who taught me that excellence comes in forms I wasn't smart enough to recognize. If you'll have me, I'd like to make sure your aircraft is always ready to perform at the same level you demonstrated during that emergency." Maya accepted his request, and their professional relationship became a model for how respect could be earned and acknowledgement could be given when assumptions were replaced by evidence. A year later, when new female pilots arrived at Edwards for F-16 training, they found an environment that had been fundamentally changed by Maya's emergency landing. The conversations had shifted from whether women could fly fighter aircraft to how the Air Force could identify and develop the best pilots, regardless of gender. Maya Chen had proven that the sky recognizes no gender boundaries, and that sometimes the person others expect to fail is exactly the person who can show everyone what success really looks like. The woman they said would crash had instead shown them how to soar.